Zakai Zeigler, the best point guard since, because Jimmy, I'm going to have to eat some crow. I wasn't a big Zakai guy, and I've been won over. I realize he's a defensive player to me. He can play a little out of control at times, but I get his role, and I think I was a little hard on him last year and earlier this season. So I'm beginning to get won over by Zakai. He's the best point guard since whom?
Well, there's a guy I really like. So there are some people that may see this differently. I thought Jordan Bone was a really nice point guard for a few years, but to me, I'd say the best since C.J. Watson. I thought Watson was terrific. I really liked him. I thought he was a good shooter. He was a good defender. He racked up assists. He played in the NBA. He scored, I think I'm right about this, at least 30 points for two different teams at different times in the NBA. He didn't stick. I get that. But I would say since C.J. Watson, who I thought was a really, really good point guard.
Caleb, let me ask you the same question, brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Go to facebook.com, follow them, Sports Treasures TN, Sports Treasures TN, and they're going to supply us with some incredible giveaways on our new Patreon group. We're going to name it Hooker's Corner. What do you think about that, Jimmy?
I love it.
Yeah. Well, we went with the brothel, and my wife vetoed that.
Yeah. The corner's better, but yeah.
Yeah. So you can be a John in Hooker's Corner and win all kinds of great prizes.
My first name is John.
Caleb, what are your thoughts? Best Tennessee point guard since? I would probably go Watson. Maybe I don't like Bone quite as much as Jimmy, but I thought Watson was so underrated while he was evolved that he was just like another guy, when in reality, he managed the game, and I thought he was a very good point guard. How about you, Caleb?
Yeah, it's funny. I would probably agree with C.J. Watson, his last year with Bruce Pearl. And by the way, Jimmy, he actually was a journeyman for 10 years in the NBA. And my thing is the way NBA players are paid relative to other sports. If you make it 5 years in the NBA, you're set. That's a success.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most elite sports league there is, if you really think about the number of players who play basketball versus the number of roster spots available. And I think C.J. Watson would be on my all-time team of great players who had the misfortune of playing for horrible coaches in Tennessee basketball. Because before
Except for the last one,
he spent 3 years under Buzz Peterson, and Ron Slay's on that list, and I don't, we have him on the show. I don't want to call out his coaches to his face, but like Ron Slay, C.J. Watson, and Allen Houston are just like, I mean, you could build an all-time Tennessee team of great players stuck in really bad eras, and C.J. Watson would be on that list.
Yeah, he would be. And I elevated my opinion of him by seeing what he could do into Pearl. I liked him before I saw what he did with Pearl, and I think Pearl brought out the best of him, like he did in a number of other players, including Dame Bradshaw, for example.
Let's look forward if we can, and then Caleb, I want you to jump into the NCAA tournament. Everybody that fills out a bracket knows to say guard play is so important in March. But it is, and Tennessee appears to have not just great guard play, because I wouldn't consider Dalton Connect a guard, but they've got a bunch of guys who can handle the ball on the perimeter. How advantageous do you think that will be come March in the NCAA tournament?
I'm sorry, was that at me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's going to be huge. I do think it's a lot about guard play. I also think you have to have the complementary pieces to go with it. If all you have are guards and no inside game, if all you have are guards and nobody that can get rebounds or stop somebody inside or score inside, that's a problem. But I do think that Tennessee has the potential to have really good guard play, led by Zeigler, who I think is one of the best point guards in the SEC. I guess you would call Connect a wing, but Vescovi has shown that he can be a really solid player for you. I think the guard play is really good, and I think they have all the pieces to make a long run in the NCAA tournament. I really do. Now, and I see an upside where I mentioned before, I think their ceiling's very high. That doesn't mean they're going to make the Final Four, but I think this is the best team, and they have the formula to make it.
So, Jimmy, my big issue, and it's been an issue consistently, And it's actually a problem ever since Rick Barnes has been at Tennessee, because it was the same issue in 2019 when they ran about 7 guys. Now they run about 7.5, because you could say Toby Awaka plays like about half the time than what he should. Isn't that lack of depth going to be the one thing that holds them back in the tournament, particularly if Jonas Adu gets in foul trouble?
Yeah, it could be. I have don't see it the same way as Coach Barnes in terms of playing your backups. I think he should play these guys more. Goodness, you're up. Was it against Alabama? They're up by 20 points, and Connett and Ziegler are still in the game at the final buzzer. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, I don't get that. Get those guys some minutes. Get Freddie DeLeon some minutes. Get those guys some more playing time. I do think they have the potential, because you're basically going to go 8 deep, right? I think they've got 3 guys off the bench that can be contributors for them. I just think they need to play more. I think Gainey, with some of the 3-point shooting he's had recently, can really help him. Awaka can help him. Maybe J.P. Estrella is another guy. We've seen some flashes from him. Cameron Carr had a pretty good 3 or 4 minutes against Kentucky. But I do think they've got to develop some of those guys, get them more minutes so that they do have quality depth and a depth that you can count on in the postseason.
Yeah, poor Caleb got ripped on the YouTube message board for saying that Tennessee doesn't have depth. Caleb never said that. Caleb said Tennessee has depth. They're just not using it. Those are two very different things, Jimmy. And I wonder what Rick Barnes's argument is on that.
I've heard him say that you earn playing time. So if they don't practice at a certain level, then they don't play. He played Cameron Carr because he said Carr had a really good week of practice, and that he asked Carr, if I play you against Kentucky, what will you bring to the table? He said, I'll get you an extra possession. And he did. He got a steal and an alley-oop dunk pass to maybe James, if I remember right. So, but he bases a lot of it on how do you practice. And so that's what determines how much the guys off the bench get to play.
So, Jimmy, but with that thought, I get his whole point of you earn playing time. And in the tournament, you're right. You want to go 8 deep in the tournament. I don't think depth matters once you're in the tournament as much. But isn't it important where even if a guy can't play well, when you're playing a mediocre team, to run a couple of guys out there that may not be that good, just so your starters can be fresh when tournament time comes?
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yeah. So I don't want to hear late in the year we're leg weary. No. If you are, that's your fault, because you could have played these guys fewer minutes. And so I just see that a little bit. Now, he's probably won 790 more games than I have. I get that. But I just think
same number of national titles.
I'm sorry?
Y'all have the same number of national titles.
We have the same number of national titles. And he's only been to one more Final Four than I've been to.
That's just mean, Caleb.
It was, but I went along with it. But I do think that they need to play their bench a little bit more. And one criticism of Barnes has been that he practices them just as hard late in the year as he does during the season, middle of the season before. I don't think he does that anymore based on what I've heard, which I think is what you need to do. You need to make sure that your players have their legs and they're rested and ready to go for postseason.